Everyone, and welcome to our deltaDNA webinar on 7 deadly game insights. Our CEO, Mark Robinson, will be taking you through some key game and player insights taken from our game analytics platform. He's also going to talk you through how you should be actioning these insights. The webinar is scheduled to take 30 minutes, and a recording is being made that will be available to you once we've finished. Feel free to put any questions you have to Mark, and he will try to answer them at the end of the session. Now I'm going to pass you over to Mark, who will be taking you through each of the insights. Mark, go ahead.
Thanks, Louise. So I'm hopeful that everybody can hear us here, and that we've got the technology working properly. What I was going to do this morning was to just run through a little bit of the context. Since we started deltaDNA 3 years ago, we've been very focused on how players engage with free-to-play games, understanding the different types of players that are in your games and how they respond to the environment. So this is the basis of how we start to generate these player insights that we're going to talk about today. But free-to-play is difficult. I think we should. We all know that, we all realize that some of the mechanics that are inherent in engaging and monetizing players in free-to-play actually go against players' sense of fun, sense of experience sometimes. And in some respects, there's a contradiction between the free-to-play mechanics and the player's experience and their enjoyability. So some of these insights are actually designed to help with that potential conflict and to build good experiences that respond to players and their different needs, and also then to be able to have free-to-play experiences that are good experiences for players and fundamentally make money for the game publishers and the developers. So next slide, if I can get this to work. So this is me, Mark Robinson. I'm CEO of deltaDNA. deltaDNA is an analytics and personalization platform working with a wide range of, from the largest publishers to indie developers, helping companies move beyond dashboard reporting into understanding player segmentation, messaging strategies within the game, and how to optimize the experience for all types of players. So let's just talk a little bit about the economics of free-to-play. Over the hundreds of games on our platform, we've done some analysis of what it looks like in terms of retention rates and monetization rates. So some of the figures here are pretty troubling. Many games live with low retention rates, and we know that low retention rates have an impact on lifetime value. Over the games on our platform, we see that on average less than 40% of players return for a second session after the first session. So 60% or more of players on average only play for one session. And with expensive acquisition out there, this is a difficult statistic, and one of the things that we focus on with our clients is actually trying to improve that session one metric, understanding how players interpret the first 60 seconds of gameplay, what sort of experience we want to deliver through that gameplay, and how we encourage players to return for a second session. And some of the points that I'll be covering later on will address that particular concern. Combined with difficult retention rates, obviously in free-to-play, there is another factor that compounds that, which is the percentage of players that ultimately pay with in-app purchases. Over our platform, the average is less than 1%. So once we get players through that first session, it's really important that we have an experience that leads players through engagement to ultimately monetizing them and incentivizing them to contribute to the game development and improve lifetime value. Also at deltaDNA, we're working to understand the impact of ad serving. So the combination of in-app purchase and ad serving is where free-to-play games make their money. And one of the concepts that we're working hard on is what are the relevant target groups to serve in-app purchase offers, and how does that differ from ad serving responsive players. We understand that expert players and paying players shouldn't be served ads potentially, and that novice players and grinders are happy to consume those ads. So we're working hard to help our clients target ads and target in-app purchases consistently and appropriately, so that we optimize the revenue flows in the game overall. But right now, the combination of retention rates and percentage paying means that actually we're very reliant on a small set of whales to generate the majority of the income for the game. Now, one of the things that helps the economy of the game is to drive that value dynamic further across the playing base, so that we get a wider range of paying players, some of which will spend sporadically, and we get targeted revenues generated from ad serving as well. Some of the insights that we'll talk about in a minute will point you in the direction of how that can be achieved. So we've got an economic situation where retention rates certainly can be improved, and this will have an effect on lifetime value. Our design team at deltaDNA works with our clients in terms of optimizing the free-to-play game design. And these are some of the mechanics that we look at. And it's not surprising that when you're trying to balance a game, taking into account 10 or 12 different mechanics as you're trying to lead players through the experience is really a very skillful thing to do. And appointment setting, rewarding, the game difficulty, how that ramps up, incentivizing people for repeat play, how the tasks are orientated, that is a very vital part of how we bring all of these different mechanics together into a really strong playing experience. And I think it strikes us at deltaDNA that we're trying to move people through a threshold of engagement. There are different reasons why players might leave the game early or earlier than we'd like. Technical issues are one, but maybe not understanding the tutorial, running out of resources too quickly, maybe the game's too difficult, or the opposite of that, too easy. We're constantly trying to keep players between these two parallel tracks of anxiety on the one hand and boredom on the other. Expert players are in danger of getting bored in certain games too quickly, and we need to make sure that they're challenged and they're making good achievements. Novice players, which are still the majority of people coming into free-to-play games, that they are not confused by the environment, that they're giving clear signals on what the game wants them to achieve, and they feel comfortable in that environment. And if we move these different types of players through those potential blockers, then we can move through what we call the threshold of engagement, and we can start to see longer sessions, repeat play, good momentum, which ultimately turns into engagement and revenue. And I think the key for us is that all players are different. We've got novices in the game, we've got experts in the game, we've got different levels of competency, we've got different levels of competitiveness in multiplayer games. You're putting experts against other experts in a matchmaking style is very effective. Making sure players are incentivized to come back, but incentivized specific to their gameplay. If they're aggressive, then reward them in different ways than a more sociable player, for example. Understanding how players are using resources, understanding whether they're sociable and collaborative, what sort of rewards the games are giving. All of these dynamics are very important in terms of understanding the different segments of players that are in your game. So this is the context around which we approach game design and managing the player experience in the game through the deltaDNA platform. Player segmentation is important, understanding your players, creating specific messaging strategies, push notification, and game management strategies, so that you know that every player in your game is getting the experience that they want, regardless of their playing style and their competency. So that's how these different insights have been generated, taking a very player focus to the game environment and understanding what is making those players responsive and engaged to the game. Oftentimes, using the technology, we like to describe it in a loop of measuring the game dynamics through the dashboards, analyzing the individual players and understanding the different segments of players that are in there. We often say that our dashboards will tell you your problems, whether your retention rate is low or whether your revenues are low, but actually you have to look beyond the dashboards, deeper into the data, to get a really good sense of how the players are experiencing the environment. And once you've understood the players, then it's really important to action those insights, whether it's through in-game messaging, through it's adjusting the difficulty, whether it's through ad serving or push. There's lots of different touch points within the game and out of the game that we can really start to manage the experience for the players. So constantly going around this iterative loop of measure, analyze, engage means that we can use the player feedback and the player data to optimize the game. So having said all of that, and hopefully that's useful as a bit of context, let's move on and talk through the 7 deadly game insights and what we have found out in terms of analysing player behaviour and what we think is useful for you guys to bear in mind when you're looking at your next game and going through beta and starting to think about player behaviours and how you can optimise the experience. So, number 1, payers who pay later, pay more. This is really important. Obviously, the industry talks a lot about whales, and we know that certain players will pay on the first session. But actually, the people that pay in the first session, and usually do that through their own impetus, they tend to be much more like one-off payers. They tend to be low lifetime value payers, and there's minimal commitment to the game. They lose momentum relatively quickly, these guys, is our experience. Actually, if you wait, and you wait a couple of days since the install, and you start to give players opportunities to pay, to give them targeted offers based on their playing style, to give them appropriate offers at the right time when they've engaged with the game and are looking to accelerate their gameplay, then actually the lifetime values improve dramatically. You can see that day 0, first session, lifetime value is about $13. Day 1, second session, $17. And then it rises up to $20. So almost the longer that people take to start to pay maximizes the LTV overall, and players will come back and spend, are much more likely to spend again. So there's nearly a 100% uplift in LTV by being patient and waiting for the right time for players to start that monetization loop. So, premium daily rewards are good mechanics to start to unlock this this value, and just making sure that unlocking of content is slow and deliberate and builds up a sense of momentum in the game. So, number 2, insight. This follows on to the first one. So just converting players to spenders is not enough. Once you've got that initial spend, then we really need to think hard about how we're going to follow that up and what are the incentives to players and the offers players that we're going to make to repeat that spend. As I said before, we're very reliant on whales. There's not that much behavior that is sporadic middle spend. Generally, in games, we see that there are a lot of one-off payers that then leave quite quickly, and then there's a small number of whales that most of the revenue is generated. What we're seeking to do with more targeted gameplay based on segments is a middle band of paying players that have got a medium value but spend often, maybe little amounts, but are consistently spending in the game. And you can see from this chart that our analysis shows that 52% of payers actually only pay once, ever. And so this is a real lost opportunity where actually thinking about the plan past the first transaction and building in an IAP loop so that we can show players a scaling up of their purchases, the benefit from those purchases, and the value of those purchases, then we can really start to build value into the relationship. So we can see from the chart that 52%, although 52% of players are only one-off payers, actually if you can get people to 3 or more transactions, then there's 30% of players will undertake this. If we can improve that percentage, then you can see there's a very big uplift in terms of revenue. The average first spend is $8, whereas the average revenue per paying user is $21. So there's nearly a 3-fold uplift there. And if we can get more payers to make that second purchase and move up the value chain, then we have got a very strong improvement in the game revenues. And the way to do that is by thinking about this IAP loop, next best offer, deal of the day, targeting these different incentives at appropriate points in the session as players come back and work through their sessions is a really vital improvement in terms of the game monetization overall. So switching from monetization now onto social dynamics, there's a lot of conversations around social conversion and how we can add value to games from the social dynamic that is very available in free-to-play and online games. However, what we see is actual social conversion is tough. 22% of players we see will connect via to the game via Facebook and other social media platforms, and only 4% of those players will do a friend invitation. So, the thought that there will be a lot of organic acquisition is unfortunately not going to be the case. However, as we go through these different points, it's important to understand that in terms of adding to the value of the game, if you do all of these things well, then the percentages overall improve dramatically. So even though only 4% of friends invite overall, actually we can see that it's very strong later in the game that you wait. So more than 3 days played, that 4% increases to 8%, whereas on day 0 it's 3%. So that, again, with the thoughts around monetization, actually being patient and waiting till later in the game helps social connectivity as well as monetization. So therefore there's a really clear pattern and strategy building up now where waiting for monetization and waiting for social connection is absolutely the right thing to do, and focus on engagement in those first few sessions so that you know that you've got the maximum playing base to start to drive these mechanics through. Let's look at some other more player-specific behaviors now that I think are fascinating and and will really help understand how to interact with players. The first one, we spotted when we were doing some analysis across our platform, and it's really interesting. Nighttime players come back, so we see a significant bump up in terms of day one retention when players install the game at night. This is possibly because they've got a little bit more time, a little bit more relaxed. They're able to play a longer session, they're able to invest more time in the game, understanding the gameplay, and then being able to commit to that game and come back for more. So certainly, we see a significant bump up, nearly 30% more in terms of retention rates when we see players install during the hours of darkness. So thinking about acquisition, thinking about timing that acquisition, concentrating on live events and time-based rewards for evenings. There's a lot of activity during the night that is actually very different from daytime gameplay, and responding to that actually improves your retention rates and your monetization rates as well. We'll talk a little bit about that monetization effect for nighttime players in point number 5. Here we see nighttime players, as well as being higher in terms of retention rates, actually they have more likelihood to transact as well, an 18% increase this time based on the hours of darkness. And this is significant. So actually, one of the mechanics to think about here is timed offers, making sure that during the nighttime sessions players are getting offers, rewards appropriate, maybe with some time cut-offs to incentivize players to make that commitment in terms of monetization. Understanding that there are different types of gameplay here during the night with longer sessions, more intense sessions, better engagement, perhaps better concentration, whereas the daytime sessions are shorter, diving in and out of the gameplay. That sort of cadence in terms of how players are using the game and interacting with the game through the day is actually quite important in terms of being able to have a game design that allows those shorter sessions during the day and then longer sessions during the evenings and nighttime when players have got the time to commit to the games. Another fascinating insight was the fact, as well as the day-night differences, was the impact of the day of the week on retention. Now, you might say that these are small percentages, but again, as you build up this picture and start to compound these percentages, this builds into really quite a big change in terms of game retention and monetization. So, Sunday's not a great day to acquire players. Players actually tend to have poorer day one retentions on a Sunday, whereas Friday and Wednesday, and actually Saturday as well, are better for acquisition. We don't know whether this is a sort of a phasing of the week effect. People are a bit grumpy on Sundays because they're returning to work on Monday. People are pretty happy on Friday, are more patient, more forgiving. But there is a significant effect here that we should bear in mind when we're spending our acquisition money and we're thinking about what sort of environment and what sort of experience players want. Because Sunday, certainly players have less patience, and Friday, perhaps they're a little bit more forgiving. So this is interesting in terms of where we really want to push our acquisition budget and how we drive volume into the game that is going to actually engage with the game. Finally, we'll just talk a little bit about platforms. Now, we're not saying that everybody should start to build PC games again, but in a multi-platform environment, which we're all moving to, it is very noticeable that PC players, or actually players on a PC platform, actually monetize better, 3.4% overall compared to 2.3% on iOS and 1.1% on Android. So there are, as well as differences in days of week and day-night, there are differences on platform. And in a multiplayer environment, in a cross-platform environment, it is useful to think about these things in terms of the game design and how you would target players with offers, how you will engage with players, because certainly taking the platform and taking the time of day and all of these other factors into consideration can substantially improve the returns and the metrics in terms of engagement and monetization. So I'm going to leave a couple of minutes for questions. That's the 7 points. We went through them pretty quickly. We have these slides available for download after the call. But just in terms of summary, 7 deadly insights around players. Fundamentally, let's get a real good knowledge of the players' behaviour and their experiences in the game. If you know your players, we're convinced that the games can be improved in terms of the metrics dramatically, engagement and monetization rates. Second point is the realization that there are different players in the game. You have novices and experts in there. Let's start treating them differently than treating them the same. Once we start to do that, we can see real uplift in terms of the core metrics. Third point, we'd say make decisions from the data. Let's reduce the guesswork. We have got the tools and the techniques now to really understand player behaviours and to be responsive to that. Real-time messaging, deep dive, big data analytics. There are platforms available like deltaDNA to figure this stuff out and to really get to know your players really well. And ultimately, knowing your players means that you will create successful games. We're not saying that analytics is the be-all and end-all. Analytics helps improve good games. It's our position that there are lots and lots of great games out there. It might not be the case that there are lots of great player experiences, and the combination of great games, great game ideas, excellent development of those games, and insightful analytics driving the management of the players is really the best of all worlds to drive your game success. So I hope that that's been useful. We've got a couple of minutes for questions. We can go over time a little if required, but we'll be communicating out to you these slides, and thank you for listening.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mark. We've had a question in from Simon, and this is in regard to the insight on early spenders spending less later. Simon would like to know how this relates to the likeliness that players will actually spend at all. So perhaps if we went back to that slide, we could look at his question.
So what the slide was communicating was that there are a bunch of players that will spend on the first session and probably do that, off their own impetus, and actually there is a bigger bunch of players that we can convert to payers once they've engaged with the game. So certainly, to Simon's point, thinking about the players that don't spend at all, it's our position that we are missing converting non-spenders to spenders by not having appropriate offers at those sessions 3, 4, 5 and 6 where we have got the opportunity to convert non-spenders to spenders once players have engaged with the game and are looking to accelerate their gameplay. Now, what the exact offer is and what the exact timing is differs from game to game, but certainly if you start to look at how players are engaging with the game and the different segments that you've got in there, then you can start to devise messaging strategies to maximise the number of players that are converting and reduce the number of non-spenders in the game. And once you've done as much as you can on that side, then it's the appropriate use of ad serving that is where we can generate some additional revenues. So bringing those things together can maximise the monetization overall. Hopefully that addresses Simon's point.
Great, thanks Mark. Hopefully that answers your question, Simon. I'm afraid that's all we've actually got time for now. If anyone has any additional questions that you'd like answered by Mark or our analytics team, do feel free to go onto our website, deltadna.com, or feel free to send us an email to info@deltadna.com. We'll be happy to get in touch with you. As Mark mentioned, the webinar has been recorded and we will be sending it out by email to all of the attendees. And later this week we'll be putting it across our social media channels, so do keep an eye out for that, and also for any future webinars that we've got coming up where we'll be revealing more fantastic game and player insights. Thanks everybody for listening, and have a nice day. Bye.